welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're doing well. I am so pumped for today's video. I am very excited to be doing this video. It's going to be a ton of work, but it's also going to be so much fun to be able to talk about all of the books that I've read so far this year. If you guys are looking around and seeing how crazy my bookshelves look, it's because a lot of my books are not on my shelves right now, and it's looking very, very crazy. But today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read this year and just going over them. I'm not going to talk too much about them because I did read 102 books this year. We're going to be talking about the first 100 books I read this year though. So I'll give short little synopsis, little things if I want to talk about them. If not, I'll just brush on past them. But I thought it would be fun to kind of recap my first half of the year, talk to you guys about it, and if in the comments you guys want to talk about some of the best books you guys have read this year, feel free to let me know. I would love to hear from you guys. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the 100 books that I've read so far this year. So I will just go ahead and say that a couple of books that I'm going to be talking about, well, a lot of books that I'm going to be talking about today, I don't own physically. So if I don't own them, of course, I'll put a picture up on the screen for you guys. A lot of the books that I read physically, some of them I unhauled, so we're just gonna have to, you know, go with the flow, figure this out as we go. But hopefully this video is gonna be entertaining for you guys nonetheless. But the first book that I read this year was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. It was the book that started off my love for reading. It's not the best book in the world, but I thank it so much and attribute it so much to my absolute love and passion for reading again. And so for that, I have to say a huge, huge thank you. Then I read House of Imperial. This is by Jasmine Eve, I think. I could be wrong about that, but overall, fantastic series. I read some more in that series, but you'll see that later on. Then one of my favorite books of all time, 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lippincott. And then I finished out the series and read House of Imperial and House of Royale, and both of those books were really good. I definitely want to get physical copies of those books because I did really enjoy them. They are a really awesome fantasy series, and I definitely need to reread them sometime soon. All right, then I picked up To All the Boys I Loved Before, P.S. I Still Love You, and Always and Forever, Laura Jean. I read them all back to back, and I love the series so much. Would totally recommend it if you're looking for a cute YA romance. Definitely a good one. All right, then I read a couple of ebooks and listened to an audiobook. The first one that I read was The Unlikely Resolutions of Oliver Clock, which I DNF'd and thoroughly disliked. And then I read It's in His Heart. This is by Alexandra Shelley, or is it Shelley Alexander? I forget. But overall, okay contemporary romance. It was all right. And then I reread The Upside of Falling Down. I listened to it on audio this time around. The first time I read it via ebook, and I thoroughly enjoyed it the second time around just as much as the first. This is a book about amnesia after a plane crash, and I found out that I really like books like that, so there you go. Then I picked up the first book in the Folk of the Air trilogy, which is, of course, The Cruel Prince, and was overall slightly disappointed. Then another book that I thoroughly enjoyed was The Sun Is Also the Star by Nicola Yoon. I definitely need to read Everything by her because I overall really enjoyed this book. Then I picked up Truth and Lies. This was a part of a mystery series by Caroline Mitchell, and wasn't my favorite. Definitely didn't continue on with the series. I find that thrillers and mysteries are very hit and miss. Either I love them or I hate them, and I just didn't love this one. Then another thriller mystery that I just didn't love was When I Was You by Minka Kent. Again, wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you just want to read all the thrillers that you can, but it was all right. It was all right. Then, of course, we have Cinder by Marissa Meyer, another staple YA book that I just overall really enjoyed and am very excited to be continuing on with the series this month. Then I read Somebody's Daughter by Rochelle B. Weinstein. I think that's how you say her name. It was something that I got off of Prime Reading, and again, another book that was overall just okay. I hated the father character in this book, and definitely not a book that I would ever reread. Then another one of my favorite books of the year was The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary. This book was fantastic. I listened to it via audiobook and really need to get myself a physical copy because it was so amazing. Then I read a smutty book called Tempting the Best Man by Jay Lynn, and again, just another okay romance. It definitely was very steamy, which I enjoy for sure, but not a book that I would just go around recommending. And then, of course, another one of my favorite books of the year was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This book was fantastic. I still need to get myself a physical copy, but I have been slacking on that game, but that book is fantastic and I cannot wait to reread it. Then I went back to some physical books and I read 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. Not much I want to say about this, but yeah, that happened. Then I picked up Anna and the French Kiss by Stephanie Perkins. I thought I was going to like this book more as a reread this time around, but it was just alright. I think I ended up giving it a 3-star. I would definitely continue on with the companion novels, but just haven't gotten around to it, and it hasn't really piqued my interest. And then, of course, the one, the only, the beloved Twilight. I started my reread, I don't even remember when this was, back in February, I think, and overall, I really enjoyed the series, and it's the only series to date that I have completed, so yay me. Then another throwback YA fantasy book that I reread was Fallen by Lauren Kate. Now this book was kind of hot trash, but I am intrigued to pick up the second book in the series for sure, and I'm wondering where the series will go, if I can even make it that far. Then the next book that I read was another romance, adult romance, which it was The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren, and overall I really enjoyed this book. I like a good hate to love romance. I wish there was a little bit more hate in the hate to love, but overall, good book, definitely recommend it. And then unfortunately, we're coming across another DNF, and that was Dear Haiti, Love Lane. I got halfway through it and then decided I couldn't do it anymore, so unfortunately, that is on my list of DNF'd books this year. And here we go with the second book, 50 Shades Darker by E.L. James. Just went on continuing my reread, and that's it. Then I picked up my first graphic novel of the year, and that was Bloom, and that was by Kevin something. And overall, I liked it. It was okay. I have yet to find a graphic novel that I absolutely love. I felt like the romance just went a little bit too quick for me, but overall, it was a good graphic novel. I would recommend it for someone looking for a fun, queer graphic novel to read. And then I kept that graphic novel train rolling, and I read Slam Volume 1, and I did not like this book. I gave it a 2-star. Definitely don't recommend it. Probably the worst graphic novel that I've read to date. And another book that I loved so much was Nevermore, the first book in the Trials of Morgan Crow series by Jessica Townsend. That book was fantastic. I recently picked up the second book in the series, and I cannot wait to read it. Just a wonderful, whimsical middle grade series that I think everybody should read. Then I tried my luck at another graphic novel, and I read Mooncakes. This was by Suzanne Walker, I think. And this one I actually thoroughly enjoyed more than the rest of the graphic novels that I read. It was a queer fantasy graphic novel, and overall I really enjoyed it. Then one of my favorite books of the entire year, I read We're Going to Need More Wine by Gabrielle Union. It is a nonfiction memoir about her life, and it was just so fantastic. I recommend this book all the time, and I feel like everybody who likes her or doesn't like her should read it. I just got so much out of this book, and I felt like this book really spoke to me, and for that reason I loved it so much. Then I was on a memoir kick and decided to continue that and keep that going, so I read Hunger by Roxane Gay, and this was another book that I really enjoyed, another memoir that really spoke to me and talked a lot about topics that a lot of people don't brush on and don't talk about, and I felt like it was a fantastic memoir that talked about, you know, fat shaming and body acceptance and fat phobia, and I just thought it was really awesome. Definitely another memoir that I would 100% recommend. Then I picked up the very first book in the Wayward Children series, Every Hotter Doorway by Shauna Maguire, and thoroughly enjoyed it. I cannot wait to continue my read through of the series. I definitely want to get the physical books at some point. They're so cute and small, and I'm hoping that I can add those to my collection sometime soon. And then I picked up another memoir by Tiffany Haddish, and that was The Last Black Unicorn. This one I really enjoyed. It was definitely a different take on a memoir than what I've read previously. It was the first comedian memoir that I listened to, and overall I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, very funny, such a good time. Definitely recommend it. Then I read The Summer I Found You by Jolene Perry. Not much to say about it. It was a simple YA romance. I did like the representation in the book though, so thumbs up for that. Then another one of my favorite books of the year, and that was The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. Wow, I almost butchered that name. But I have so many things I could say about this book, and I'm not going to because this video is going to be so long, but I love it so much. I definitely recommend this as a fantasy for anyone that wants to pick up a good time-traveling, wonderful, intricate fantasy. She did a great job. And then I went back to reading ebooks, and I picked up Inception by Bianca something. I cannot pronounce that last name, but another book that I just didn't enjoy. It was a paranormal vampire romance, and it just wasn't it. It just wasn't it. All right, and then I finished off my reread, and I picked up the last book in the 50 Shades trilogy, and that is 50 Shades Freed. Overall, this is my favorite book in the series. Definitely don't recommend it if you want to read it. It's horrible writing, horrible representation for BDSM, but overall, this was the book that I enjoyed the most out of the three. The next book that I read was a book that I unfortunately unhauled, and that was Inside Out and Back Again by Tanha Lai, I think. I didn't unhaul it because I didn't love it. It just wasn't my favorite book and I wouldn't reread it again. It was a middle grade book told in verse, and I feel like if you want to read more about the Vietnamese War and children that were going through it at that time, I think it was a great book for that. Just wasn't overall for me. All right, another book that I loved so much and is still on my list of top books that I read this year, which is Slay by Brittany Morris. I am really hoping that I can get a physical copy sometime soon because I want to reread it and annotate it. It was so damn good and definitely a fantastic book, especially during this time if you want to read more about microaggressions and race in more of a fantasy-ish type of contemporary aspect. I think it was a great book for that. All right, and then we're talking about another book that I just didn't love, and that was The Falconer by Elizabeth May. I ended up giving this a 3-star, and that is very, very freaking generous. I unhauled this book already. It just wasn't for me. I didn't like the romance. The writing wasn't great. The plot ended up being really mediocre by the end of the book, and it just wasn't the book for me. All right, and picking up another memoir, I read Scrappy Little Nobody by Anna Kendrick, and I think this was my least favorite memoir that I've read so far. Not anything against her or her story, it just wasn't as entertaining as some of the other ones that I've read. Overall, would still recommend it if you want to read some more memoirs about actresses, but wasn't my favorite. All right, and then I picked up Geekarella. I totally spaced, as it's in my hand, I totally spaced, by Ashley Poston, and I really enjoyed this book. This is a wonderful YA contemporary romance. It's just so much fun and so lighthearted. I definitely want to continue on with the companion novels, and I think overall it was a fantastic book. Then I picked up the second book in the Wayward Children series, and that was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Shauna Maguire. This was my favorite book out of the series so far. Granted, I've only read 2, but I really enjoyed the second book. It was so much fun. It had queer representation. It was just so lyrical and beautifully written, and so much that she put into such a short book, but it was overall so fantastic. All right, and then I kicked off my Spring Into Reading-a-thon TBR with If I'm Being Honest by Emily Wimberly and Austin Siegmund Broca. This book was so good. I really enjoyed it. It's a really awesome YA contemporary. I feel like it had so much great commentary in this book about a lot of different things, and as an author duo, a husband and wife duo, it was a fantastic book, and I cannot wait to read more of their works. Then, sadly enough, another book that I just didn't love out of the Spring Into Reading-a-thon, and that was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I've talked about it on my channel a lot, but it just wasn't the book for me. I get why people love it, but it just unfortunately was not my cup of tea. And then I picked up The Last Song by Nicholas Sparks and bawled my eyes out like a big old baby, so I guess I can tell you how much I liked it. Okay, and during the time when I thought that I was going to participate in the Elder Ling-Along, I read the first book in the Farseer trilogy, which is The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I did enjoy the book. I ended up giving it a 3-star, but the dense fantasy just made it really hard for me to want to continue on with the series, so I put it down. I do intend to pick up the rest of the series at some point, just unfortunately not anytime soon. All right, and continuing my Spring Into Reading-a-thon TBR, I picked up The Wicked King by Holly Black, the second book in the folk fair era. I said it earlier and now I forgot. The second book to Cruel Prince, and this book was so great. Whereas the first book disappointed me a bit, this book picked up all the slack and I loved it so much. All right, and then I picked up Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan, and if you guys have watched my channel any amount of time, you will know that I really disliked this book. I was very, very disappointed by it and ultimately ended up unhauling it. It just was not for me. Not for me at all. All right, and then another book that I gave 5 stars was The Right Swipe by Alicia Ray. I loved this so much. It was a hate to love, workplace, enemy, frenemy, whatever you want to call it. It was so good. I loved it so much. I liked the concept of it being about a dating app. I just had so much fun with this book. It was so lighthearted. It made me laugh. I loved the romance, and overall would totally recommend this book. All right, and then another wonderful DNF, and that was The Playground by Jane Schmielt. I really just liked this book. Again, if you guys watch my channel enough, you will know that I just didn't love it, and unfortunately, it was a terrible end to the Spring Into Reading-a-thon, but you know, it is what it is. All right, and then it's a disappointment after disappointment, and that is Anna Kay by Jenny Lee. I really did not like this book. It took me a month, almost 2 months to read this book, and after listening to the audiobook, I still thoroughly did not enjoy it. I gave it a 2-star, I unhauled it, I didn't like it. All right, back into some books that I actually have on my shelves, and I continue my reread of Twilight and finished up New Moon. I didn't like this book as much as I thought I was going to in my reread, but you know, to each his own. Some people love this book, personally, it wasn't my favorite in the series. And then I did my 24-hour readathon where I read the Percy Jackson series. So I read The Lightning Thief and Sea of Monsters during that 24-hour readathon. I did read half of the third book, but just didn't end up finishing it right at this time. But overall, I love the series and I cannot wait to finish it. Then I have Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. If you guys know, Sarah J. Maas has quickly become one of my new favorite authors. I definitely need to continue on with the series for sure. It will definitely be happening in the month of August, best believe, and I'm very, very excited for everything that she's put out. Everything that I've read so far by her, I have absolutely loved. All right, and then I participated in my own little readathon, the April Showers readathon, where I read some sad books in the span of 4 days. And the first book that I read was The Chaos of Standing Still by Jessica Brody. I love this book so much. It's one of my favorite books of all time. I don't have it here with me because I actually gave it to one of my subscribers. And I will definitely be getting myself another copy of the book, but unfortunately, I don't have that one here to show you, but I love that book so much and 100% recommend it if you're looking for a good, hard-hitting YA novel. It was amazing. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. I didn't love this book as much as I thought that I was going to. I think that it has really awesome topics about suicide and suicidal thoughts and depression and bipolar disorder and mania. All of those things were talked about in this book, and I think that it brought up the topic really well, but it just wasn't the book for me necessarily. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And another book that I was slightly disappointed by, and that was The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I really wanted to love this book, but I think the fact that I watched the movie and I already knew what was going to happen kind of made me not like it as much as I would have wanted. But overall, still a great book. I don't know if I would reread it anytime soon, but I liked it. And then I picked up the first book in this series, part of a new reread, and that is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. At the time, I didn't know the prequel was coming out, but I'm very glad that I'm rereading the series. I love it so much. I have a newfound appreciation for Suzanne Collins and her writing. She's fantastic, and I really loved this series for sure. And then I picked up Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare, the first book in the Infernal Devices series, and I overall really enjoyed this book. I cannot wait to continue on with the series. I fell in love with these characters, and I know that I'm going to be a Cassandra Clare stan by the end of this. All right, and then I picked up a book that is, you know, very hated here on BookTube, and that is Marked by PC Cast and Kristen Cast. This is part of the House of Night series. This is a reread for me. I did read most of the books in the series when I was in middle school and high school, and so I wanted to see how it fared in today's, you know, political climate. But I overall didn't love my reread, but I was intrigued enough to continue on with the series, so yeah. Then I read some books for the Asian Readathon, and the first book that I read was Love Boat Taipei, and that was by Abigail Hing Wen. I'm sorry if I butchered that, but I didn't love this book as much as I thought that I was going to. However, I really liked the topic of race and culture, and I think that it was a wonderful coming of age story, and if you're looking for something like that, I would definitely recommend it. Then one of my favorite books of the year, and that is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Y'all know I love this book. I love this book so much. It made me cry, it made me happy, it made me just fall in love with these characters, and I cannot wait to read more of Emily Henry's work because I was thoroughly impressed. And continuing on with some books for the Asian Readathon, I picked up Reflection by Elizabeth Lim. This is part of the Twisted Tale series with Disney, and it was the Mulan retelling, What If Mulan Went to the Underworld. It was overall a really good retelling. I have now 3 more of the Twisted Tale series in my collection, and I cannot wait to read them. Then I picked up an audiobook through Libby, and that was Turtle Under Ice by I don't know that last name, sorry, but I'll obviously have a picture up on the screen. This was a book written in verse about a sister who disappears in the middle of a snowstorm, and overall, I just didn't love it. Again, books written in verse, I just have not found a book that I absolutely love, so I'm hoping that that will change very, very soon. And then after all of that, I was in the mood for some smut, and so I picked up Theirs for the Night by Katie Robert, and she has quickly become one of my new favorite smut authors. I absolutely love the way that she writes, her characters, her intimate scenes are steamy for sure, and if you're looking for a new smut author, I would definitely recommend checking her out. Then I read Me Before You by Jojo Moyes, and this was a reread for me. I really enjoyed this book on the second go around. I cried like a big old baby per usual, and overall really enjoyed it. Then I picked up my second to last book for the Asian Readathon, and that was Frankly in Love by David Yoon. I had high hopes for this book because I really liked his wife's work, Nicola Yoon, but overall I just didn't love this book. A lot of reasons as to why, but unfortunately just wasn't my favorite. Then I finally finished my read through of The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan. Obviously, I started the first half of this book during my 24-hour readathon, and it took me a whole nother month and a half before I finally finished the book, and I really enjoyed it, of course. I'm very excited to continue on with the series. And then I read the last book for the Asian Readathon, and that was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, and unfortunately, I DNF'd this book. It just was not the type of book for me. It was more literary fiction. It didn't have a ton of plot. Not a lot going for it, for me particularly. I know a lot of people that loved the book, and unfortunately, I just didn't love it. All right, the next book that I picked up was Shatter Me by Tahara Mafi. I really enjoyed the first book in the series. I'm definitely intrigued to move on with the series as a whole, and I'm hoping that it doesn't let me down. All right, and then we have 3 back-to-back rereads. I then picked up Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. You guys know, love this series. All right, guys, sorry for the abrupt pause, but my mom called. That's better, and we're back in business. The next book that I read was Eclipse by Stephanie Meyer. This was my least favorite book. No, this wasn't my least favorite book. This was my least rated book in the series, but it's because I didn't like how some of the things were handled in this book, and unfortunately that brought my rating way down. And the last book that I reread during this stretch of rereads was Betrayed by PC Cass and Kristen Cass, the second book in the House of Night series. Overall, I enjoyed the second book way better than the first, but still not my favorite. And then I picked up my very first Stephen King book, and I was slightly unimpressed, and that was Elevation, obviously by Stephen King. I was expecting a lot more since he's so beloved as an author, and I just didn't love this book, but I definitely feel like I should give him another try with one of his more popular books. So if you guys have any recommendations for that, let me know. All right, and then I started my Pride Secret TBR, which unfortunately the video never made it to you guys, but I'm still really excited for the books that I read that month. And the first book that I read was Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli, and I loved this book so much. I think this book is a fantastic queer book, and it just gave me such awesome feels and made me feel so like gooey inside. The romance in here was incredible, and I loved the main characters so much, and overall really definitely recommend this. All right, and then I read another classic that I just didn't love, and that was The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I DNF'd it. It wasn't for me. Not gonna talk about it anymore. All right, and then I picked up another memoir, and that was I Can't Make This Up by Kevin Hart. This book was fantastic. It was hilarious, as well as so insightful, and had so many awesome lessons in it. Definitely a memoir that I would recommend if you want to have a good laugh, but also learn a lot. All right, and then we have a booktuber shout out, and that is The Anti-Virginity Pact by Katie Wimser. This book was fantastic. I gave this book a 5-star. It was one of the hardest books to read and get through because it dealt with such incredibly difficult subject matter, but she handled it with such grace and care, and I loved this book to pieces, and I cannot stop recommending it. If there's any book that you take away from this, I think this one should be it. All right, continuing on with my Pride TBR, and then I picked up What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. I really enjoyed this book. I liked the romance. It wasn't my favorite book that I read out of the queer books that I read that week, but overall, I still really enjoyed it and would definitely recommend if you're looking for a good male-male relationship. All right, and then I picked up I Wish You All the Best by Mason Deaver. This was a book with non-binary rep, and it was a really good book, but also another book that was really hard to get through. It definitely dealt with a lot of tough subject matters, and I felt like it was handled really well. I think that Mason Deaver, as a writer, they have a lot of potential, but it just wasn't my favorite out of all of the books that I read for that queer TBR. And then the best book that I read for that secret TBR was Pet by Akawe. Oh, how do you say this name? I don't know. But this book was fantastic. It is a fantastic book with a really awesome metaphor for life, and I really think that everyone should read it. I don't like to say a lot about the synopsis of this book because it's so short, and I feel like you should experience it for yourself, but it was so good. All right, and then I read another graphic novel, Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, by Rosemary Valero O'Connell. And again, just another graphic novel that I didn't love, unfortunately. I didn't care for the relationship in this book. I don't think you're supposed to, but overall, I just didn't love it. I do like the fact that it had really pretty pink saturation in the art style, but other than that, That's all I really liked. And then I picked up another book that I was so excited to read, and that was Nevernight by J. Kristoff. I was thoroughly surprised by this book. I really thought I was going to be terrified by this book and everything that it had in it, from the footnotes to the writing to everything about it. And overall, I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm so glad that I read it. All right, and then I picked up another middle grade. It was an audiobook, and I read The Longest Ride. I don't remember who this is by, but I didn't overall really enjoy it. It was an okay book, but it wasn't my favorite. I definitely feel like the audiobook made me very confused. It was very hard to tell the characters apart, and I just didn't love it. All right, and then I picked up another memoir that I absolutely loved, and that was Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This book was fantastic. It was so good. Again, one of the best memoirs that I have read. It was fantastic. Out of all the memoirs that I've read, I would definitely recommend Gabrielle Union and Trevor Noah. They were both so good and just had so much depth to them, and I would 100% recommend them. All right, and then I finished up my reread of the Twilight series with Breaking Dawn. It was my favorite book in the entire series. It was so good. I loved hearing about Bella's perspective becoming a vampire, and it was just so much fun to read. I rewatched the movies in the same order as I read them, and it was just so much fun. All right, and then I read my favorite book of all time, my favorite book of the year, probably my favorite book of my entire life, and that was Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. Is anyone surprised? No. I'm not going to talk about this book because I have been gushing about it nonstop for quite some time, and if I start, I might never stop. So it was amazing. Loved it so much. All right, and then I picked up Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I was really nervous to read this book, but I'm so glad that I really enjoyed it. I ended up giving it a 4-star. It wasn't my favorite book of all time. I would still recommend it to others though, and overall, for the type of book that it is and the way that it was written, I overall really enjoyed it. All right, then I finished Recursion by Blake Crouch. I overall enjoyed this book. I think that it was a really awesome sci-fi, definitely a really awesome sci-fi for me to start out with. It really reminded me of Inception, one of my favorite movies of all time. I just didn't love the ending, unfortunately, but still an awesome book. I wouldn't reread it again, but I really enjoyed it. All right, and my last DNF of this list, I unfortunately started and DNF'd All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This book was just incredibly boring and just wasn't for me, unfortunately. I wish I could have loved it, but it wasn't for me. We're losing light, I gotta hurry up. The next book that I finished and absolutely hated was Cabin at the End of the World. This book was so pointless. I didn't like it. I ended up giving it a 1-star. It was horrible. All right, and then the queen, she's back. I read ACOTAR by Sarah J. Maas, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Of course, I gave it a 5-star. It was wonderful. I cannot wait to continue on with the series. I have been talking with one of my subscribers, Sharon. She's so amazing. She has absolutely loved the series so much, and she's been raving about it, so now I just have to read it. All right, then I picked up So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijeoma. Ooh, I'm not gonna say that. Nope, I'm gonna butcher it. But this book was fantastic. If you're looking to read a book about anti-racism and microaggressions and race and everything that comes along with that, this was a fantastic book. So good. It was definitely a book that made me think, that kept me intrigued and listening and engaged the entire time. A lot of this book made me cry. A lot of this book made me nod my head in agreement, and it was a fantastic book. Definitely recommend it if you're looking for some more education. All right, and then I picked up the graphic novel Archie Volume 1. Again, I don't know how many times I can say this. Graphic novels, I just don't think they're for me. I didn't love this graphic novel. I do have the second one on my shelf, so I will read it, but I don't think I'm going to be keeping this, and I wouldn't continue on with the series. All right, second to the last book that I read was The Devil's Thief by Lisa Maxwell. This book slightly let me down, I'm not gonna lie. Being as it is a sequel of one of my favorite books of all time, which was The Last Magician, I just wanted more from this book, and I felt like it definitely suffered from middle book syndrome, unfortunately. I wish that I could have loved it more than I did, but overall, I still gave it a 4-star. Overall, I'm still really excited to continue on with the series, and I know that she's not gonna let me down with the third book. I believe in her, I do. All right, and the very last book that I read for the first half of the year was The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. This book was really good. I definitely had higher expectations because I've heard such great recommendations for this book. However, I think that it was still really amazing. The writing style was fantastic. The magical realism in this book was incredible. And like I said before, if any of you guys have read this and want to chat about what you guys think about this book, please let me know because I'm still looking for some more insight. Okay, that is the end of this video. That is all 100 and some odd books that I read this year. There were a couple of books that I left out for intentional reasons, but it is what it is. I'm so happy with my progress this year. I'm so shocked that I went from reading 0 books in the last 5 years to reading 100 books in a half of a year. And I'm so excited for what the rest of the year has to hold. I would love to know what you guys have been reading this past year, how many books you've read. I know with talking about as many books as I've read this year, that can kind of put some people off and feel like they haven't accomplished as much, and definitely don't feel like that. Everyone reads at their own reading pace. Everyone has their own like timelines and schedules, and life is busy, life is crazy, and don't feel down because you haven't read as many books as maybe I have, or some other booktubers that you guys watch. Don't feel pressured to have to read as many books as we do. Take it at your own pace. Do what makes you happy. Do what fulfills your soul. I definitely don't think that next year I will read as many books, but I had so much fun nonetheless. Thank you guys so much for all the love and support that you continue to give me every single day. I love you all with all of my heart, and I'm so grateful and blessed to have you guys in my life. So thank you so much. That is the end of this video. I am not going to hold up all those books because you know that's not possible. But I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to give it a big old thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe before you leave. And of course, leave any comments, questions, and suggestions in the comment section below. And I will see you in the next video.